The Senate will come to order. Chaplain Dr. Back will lead the Senate in prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. God Most High, your faithfulness endures through all generations. Hear our prayer. You desire truth and justice, and you are true to your promises. You promised your children in Isaiah 54:17 that no weapon formed against them will prosper. Lord, let your presence be felt today on Capitol Hill. Open the hearts of our lawmakers to your guidance as you empower them to serve with faithfulness. Dwell in them and those who support their work, making them fruitful for the glory of your name. May they hear your call to rise and follow where you lead as you inspire them to be obedient to your perfect will. Give them patience with those who oppose them, and may they trust in your perfect love, which never fails. We pray in your mighty name. Amen.
Thank you. Will you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. How you doing?
Looking sharp, buddy. Got it. Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. The senator from Iowa.
Recently, we've witnessed China peddling false claims as it continues to try and convince the United States that China is a good partner. So China has recently claimed this, quote, "The Chinese always honor and deliver what has been promised," end quote. What China asserted is nonsense. Nobody ought to believe that the promises made are honored. So I want to give you one example. Inter-country adoptions. During COVID-19 pandemic, China, they say temporarily, restricted travel into the country, which stalled hundreds of families from completing their adoptions. Today, the families I mentioned continue to be separated from their adoptive child in China, or are learning that the child they have been matched with for many years has been rematched with a different family in China. In this latter case, it's a case for the Robinson family of Iowa. Does that sound like China always honors and delivers what it promises? I think not. In September of last year, I wrote the Chinese ambassador to the United States outlining my concerns about China's termination of its inter-country adoption program and urged China to not go back on its promises, but instead allow for matched adoptions to finally be completed. That has not happened. Now, it is a positive development that Chinese families have a stronger will and capacity to adopt orphans within their own country. Children having a safe and loving home is always a good thing. But my point of contention is that China left American families in the dark and didn't engage in good faith. American families were not given the same opportunity as families from other countries to be united with their children. Real commitments were made, and they were dismissed. This brought disruption to families and needlessly left children orphaned. Again, I suggest China doesn't honor its commitments, and I pray that the hearts of Chinese leaders experience a transformation. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alster-Brooks.
I'm on circuit 9 to 1, just making sure you guys are rolling. Yes. Okay, great, thank you. Heads up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Trump administration continues to unleash chaos, cruelty, and corruption on the American people. Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans have been a complete and total failure, domestically and internationally. Donald Trump promised that on day one of his presidency, he would end the war in Ukraine. He promised on day one of his presidency, he would free the hostages to bring about peace in the Middle East. And Donald Trump promised that on day one of his
presidency, the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Madam President, before I begin my remarks this afternoon, I want to speak briefly about Iran. For decades, the regime in Iran and its terrorist proxies have sought to sow chaos and violence throughout the Middle East. They threatened death to America and to wipe Israel off the map. All the while, the mullahs have pursued a nuclear enrichment program that goes well beyond what is required for peaceful energy purposes. Madam President, Iran can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. This has been the position of President Trump and members of this body for years. Since his re-election, President Trump made clear that a peaceful resolution was possible if Iran agreed to give up its nuclear weapons ambitions. Iran's leaders refused. As a result, on Saturday, the President ordered precise and limited strikes to go after Iran's nuclear program consistent with this long-held national security imperative. I'm grateful for the professionalism of all of our service members in carrying out this important mission. Madam President, just a few hours ago, Iran launched an attack against our service members in Qatar and Iraq. President Trump has been clear that he is not afraid to hold Iran accountable for any retaliation, and Iran risks going down a dangerous road with these attacks. Nevertheless, I'm glad that the initial reports indicate that no Americans were killed in these strikes. If Iran is considering any further attacks against U.S. forces or interests, it should think long and hard about the consequences. Madam President, I look forward to hearing from the administration during tomorrow's all senators briefing. Madam President, we are getting closer to passing a bill that will help make America stronger and more prosperous. A bill that will ensure that working families can keep more of their hard-earned money, that will help small businesses grow and create jobs, strengthen America's farms and ranches, rebuild our military, secure our border, and, of course, unleash American energy. Madam President, this bill is great news for our entire country, for Americans from every place and walk of life. But today I want to talk about how this bill will help make my home state of South Dakota stronger and more prosperous. That starts with making tax relief permanent. In 2017, Republican-led Tax Cuts and Jobs Act meant lower tax bills for South Dakotans. That bill lowered tax rates for every income bracket, doubled the child tax credit, and nearly doubled the standard deduction. But those tax policies are set to expire, Madam President, this year if Congress doesn't act, which would mean an average South Dakotan would see a $2,500 tax hike next year. We're not going to let that happen. Our bill will extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act's lower tax rates. It will extend the doubled child tax credit. It will extend the nearly doubled standard deduction. But not just extend them, Madam President, make them permanent so that no hardworking American has to worry about a looming tax hike again a few years down the road. I said we're going to make the $2,000 child tax credit permanent, but we're actually going to go even further by increasing the child tax credit by another $200. Under Republicans' bill, the child tax credit will now be $2,200 per child permanently. Madam President, we're also delivering on a number of the President's campaign promises that will provide further relief to hardworking Americans. Under our bill, seniors will be able to reduce their taxes further with a $6,000 boost to their standard deduction. Police officers, firefighters, and hourly workers won't have to pay tax on their overtime pay. Waitresses and busboys will benefit from no tax on tips. And the next generation will be able to access new investment accounts as adults that they can use for their education, to buy their first home, to start a business, in short, to get a running start on their American dream. Madam President, I could go on, but the bottom line is this: a bigger bottom line for hardworking Americans for the long term. More money in their paychecks, more opportunity, and a brighter future ahead. Madam President, the 2017 tax reform also helped grow our economy by lifting the tax burden on American businesses. Small businesses, farms, and ranches all benefited from lower tax rates and investment incentives. Tax reform freed up cash that business owners could use to invest in their operations and their workers. And South Dakotans saw those benefits on Main Street and on the farms and ranches that are the lifeblood of our state. Now Republicans are poised to make many of those reforms permanent. That includes investment incentives like full expensing for new equipment and for domestic research and development. It includes the job-creating 199A small business deduction. And it includes raising the death tax exemption to $15 million and linking it to inflation, meaning countless family farms, ranches, and small businesses will be spared the threat of this fundamentally flawed tax and the headaches that come with trying to plan for it. And speaking of farms and ranches, Madam President, in addition to providing farmers and ranchers with tax relief, our bill updates the farm safety net to address some of the challenges farmers and ranchers have been facing. It increases reference prices for every covered commodity and makes these prices more responsive to market conditions in coming years. It increases crop insurance coverage and affordability, including for farmers just starting out. It supports livestock producers by making existing programs more responsive to drought and by funding prevention of animal diseases that can devastate livestock. It invests in critical conservation programs, including programs that support South Dakota's wild bird populations. And it supports a bright future for agriculture by funding grants for research at agriculture research institutions and promoting trade for commodities in foreign markets. Madam President, America's farmers and ranchers have faced some serious challenges in recent years, some of the toughest, in fact, in recent memory. I'm proud that we are addressing their needs in this bill. And I can assure America's ag producers that their priorities will continue to be a priority here in Washington. Madam President, there's a lot more I could say about this bill and how it will help South Dakota and our entire country. But before I close, I want to focus on how it will make America more secure. It makes a down payment on strengthening our military by investing in the equipment our men and women in uniform need to keep America safe amid today's threats and tomorrow's. And that includes expediting production of the new B-21 long-range strategic bomber, the future backbone of the Air Force's bomber fleet. In the coming years, the B-21s will operate from several locations, including South Dakota's Ellsworth Air Force Base. And it is emblematic of the type of investments this bill is making in our military's future. This bill also makes a significant investment in our border security, including finishing the border wall. And last but not least, it unleashes American energy. It reverses course from the Biden administration's hostility to responsible, conventional energy production. And it will help guarantee a secure, stable, and affordable energy supply for American families and businesses and for our national security. Madam President, a safer, stronger, and more prosperous America is within reach. We've made a lot of progress on this bill, and it's almost time to vote. And I'm looking forward to finishing our work and getting these policies in place for the benefit of South Dakota and of our entire country. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Ms. Alsterbrooks.
I'm on circuit 901, just making sure you guys are rolling. Yes. We're, okay, great, thank you. Heads up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Trump administration continues to unleash chaos, cruelty, and corruption on the American people. Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans have been a complete and total failure, domestically and internationally. Donald Trump promised that on day one of his presidency, he would end the war in Ukraine. He promised on day one of his presidency, he would free the hostages to bring about peace in the Middle East. And Donald Trump promised that on day one of his presidency, costs would go down in the United States of America. None of it has happened. Instead, costs in the United States of America aren't going down, they're going up. Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans are crashing the economy in real time and driving us toward a possible recession. Donald Trump and House Republicans have not done a single thing to lower the high cost of living in the United States of America. Not a single thing. Instead, Republicans are trying to jam this one big, ugly bill down the throats of the American people. The GOP tax scam represents the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. It's an all-out assault on the health care of the American people. Children, families, people with disabilities, seniors, veterans will all be hurt by the GOP tax scam. Premiums, copays, and deductibles will go up for tens of millions of Americans. Hospitals will close. Nursing homes will shut down. Community-based health clinics will be unable to operate. And because more than 16 or so million people in America will lose their health care, people in this country will die. That's what Republican governance has brought to the United States of America. The GOP tax scam will also cut nutritional assistance from the American people. Children and seniors and older Americans will literally have food ripped away from them. And this all-out assault on health care, this all-out assault on nutritional assistance is being done by Republicans so they can provide their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks that they don't need and don't deserve. The one big, ugly Republican bill will hurt everyday Americans in order to reward billionaires. At the same time, Donald Trump and his actions, which do not appear to be consistent with the United States Constitution, takes unilateral offensive military action without seeking the approval of the United States Congress. The use of military force, which is offensive in nature, must be approved by the House and the Senate. That's according to the Constitution. It's not optional, Donald. It's not. The framers of the Constitution actually gave Congress the power to declare war for a reason, so the American people, through their elected representatives, would have the opportunity to debate the issue and make some decisions as it relates to what's in the best interest and the national security of the American people. Donald Trump and the administration chose to ignore the Constitution. And so they're going to have to come before Congress and explain their justification for an offensive military strike against Iran. Yes, we can never allow Iran to become a nuclear power. And of course, Israel has the right to defend itself and will support Israel's security in an ironclad manner. But the Trump administration intentionally decided to ignore the aggressive diplomacy that was available to it to try to address the Iranian nuclear threat and ignore the requirements of the Constitution, and now they've got to explain why. And we expect that justification, not just at the classified briefing behind closed doors tomorrow.
The Democratic leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, earlier today, we received reports that Iran has targeted U.S. military bases and U.S. service members in the Middle East. putting the lives of thousands of Americans at immediate risk. I join Americans. I pray for their safety. This afternoon, I asked the Trump administration to immediately provide a classified briefing laying out the full threat picture, the intelligence behind Iran's retaliation, and the detailed scope and timeline of any U.S. response. More importantly, I've demanded they lay out exactly what measures they're taking right now to keep our service members safe. As I said Saturday night, Congress and the American people are owed answers. No president should be allowed to unilaterally march this nation into war with erratic threats, no strategy, no explanation. That's why I've called on Leader Thune to hold a vote immediately to enforce the War Powers Resolution. The law requires the Trump administration to consult with Congress. The Constitution demands it. And the American people, especially the families of those in harm's way, deserve nothing less. Confronting the Iranian regime's nuclear ambitions and stopping their campaign of terror demands strength, resolve, and strategic clarity. On reconciliation, we've arrived at a pivotal week in the United States Senate, a week where Senate Republicans have to make a choice. Either stand up for your constituents, stand up to defend Medicaid, stand up to protect millions of good-paying jobs, or stand with Donald Trump and his billionaire friends. That's the fundamental choice Republicans face with their so-called big, beautiful bill. Before the week is out, we expect Republicans will bring their bill to the floor for debate. That means very soon the Senate is going to have a long night of vote-a-rama. When vote-a-rama begins, Democrats will be ready. We will pick the Republican bill apart. We will put Republicans on record. We'll force Republicans to explain in multiple ways again and again and again why they want to cut taxes for the rich at the expense of working people. Even now, many Senate Republicans know their own bill is poison. One reason is that their bill will decimate rural hospitals, even more than the House bill would, as bad as that was. It'll do it by curtailing the provider tax that many states use to fund Medicaid. Now, they know it's terrible, so it sounds like Senate Republicans are trying to sweeten this bitter deal by adding a rural hospital fund in hopes of easing the worries of some members among their rank. But make no mistake about it, and the rural hospitals and the American Hospital Association know it, this won't work. Whatever funding Republicans would offer in a rural hospital fund would easily be overwhelmed by cuts the states would still face, by the difficulty rural hospitals would still be in. A rural hospital fund would be like putting a Band-Aid over an amputation. Again, it is not going to work. Now, even before we get to vote-a-rama, Democrats have already successfully pushed back against some of the nastiest provisions in the Republican bill. This work is certainly not done. It'll continue to be an ongoing process, but Democrats will continue to use every tool available in the Senate to fight back against the Republican bill. Today, I want to mention one important example. Yesterday, I announced that Senate Democrats successfully challenged a provision Republicans tried to sneak into their bill that would have stripped federal judges of their ability to enforce their own rulings. Now, we all know federal judges have ruled against the Trump administration in the vast majority of cases that are currently in court. Many of the administration's most harmful executive orders have been temporarily halted through preliminary injunctions, restraining orders, and other emergency rulings by the courts. So what did Senate Republicans try to do? They tried to write a workaround into their reconciliation bill. By preventing judges from even being able to issue preliminary injunctions or restraining orders unless plaintiffs paid for the bond up front, it goes even further than what the House Republicans tried to do. That meant if someone wanted courts to put a stop to Donald Trump's freezing of federal funds, or stop DOJ from rummaging through people's private data, or any number of abuses, there are so many, they first had to pay up before the courts could even issue a court order. That's not justice, my Republican friends. That's pay to play. It's antithetical to our system of checks and balances. And once again, the wealthy are favored. They'll be able to afford these bonds. But middle-class people, poor people, many groups will not. And I'm pleased, very pleased, that we Democrats have successfully pushed back against this lawless provision. Now, to be sure, not every decision has gone our way. But we will keep fighting until the last possible moment to strip the worst parts of the big, ugly bill that have flown under the radar. None of this has been easy to do. And I want to thank all the ranking members, their staffs, involved in this long technical process. My staff has done a great job. I salute them. So has Senator Merkley's staff. He's our ranking member on the Budget Committee. The hours have been long. The issues they've worked through have been immensely complicated. So I thank them for their continued good work. And let me close, Madam President, by looking forward for a moment. The debate that will take place here on the floor in the coming days will be one of the very most consequential the Senate has seen in years. At stake is the health care of tens of millions of Americans. At stake, over 2 million jobs in red states and blue states alike, which could throw our country into a recession. There are so many job cuts, all for tax cuts for the wealthy. But today I want to leave my Republican colleagues with this. It will also, if they proceed with their big, ugly bill, they will push our nation's debt to a point of no return. If Senate Republicans try to make Donald Trump's tax cuts permanent, as they're trying to do, they will add tens of trillions to the national debt in the coming decade. Not a few trillion, tens of trillions in the coming decades. Senate Republicans know this, so what do? They try to use a budgetary gimmick called current policy baseline to pretend as if these Trump cuts taxes won't cost anything. This has never been done before in this way, but they're sort of desperate. Look, Republicans can use whatever budgetary gimmicks they want to try to make the math work on paper, but you can't paper over the real-life economic consequences of adding tens of trillions to the debt. They're adding the money to the debt, that's for sure. They just try to do as a paper trick so that it doesn't look like it, but it does. And interest rates will go sky high no matter what parliamentary gimmick they try to use. Higher borrowing costs for all Americans, for cars, for homes, for credit cards. Americans are going to feel these higher costs because interest rates will go up because they're making the debt so deep, and Americans are going to feel this everywhere they look. American household wealth will permanently be hobbled. Our economy will fail to reach its full potential. That is what will happen if Republicans proceed. Again, there aren't enough budgetary gimmicks in the world to change that fact. And for what? For what? Why are Republicans doing all of this? So billionaires can pay less in taxes, while tens of millions lose their health care benefits and pay more for everyday expenses. I urge the Republicans not to move forward. It's abundantly clear the bill is deeply flawed. And if they do, Senate Democrats will continue to expose the Republicans' bill for the debt-busting mess that it truly is. I yield the floor. No, I yield the floor.
President?
Senator from South Carolina.
Thank you. I'd like to be recognized to make some comments about the conflict we're watching unfold on our television between Iran, Israel, and now the United States. Someone asked me, what is this talk all about? I think a good title would be, what is this all about? To the American people, what is this all about? Let me tell you what it's all about. It's all about religion. A fanatical strain of Shiism is now in charge of Iran and they have three goals: to purify Islam, and about 80% of Islam is Sunni. Saudi Arabia is the center of that part of the religion. To purify Islam in the image of the Ayatollah, to destroy the Jewish state, to drive us out of the Mideast because we're infidels. This is not a democracy, it's a theocracy. And if you got any time on your hands, go on the internet and check out the theological basis of this regime. You would understand why Israel has to get this right as well as we do. But it was not always that way. Iran is not inherently a radical group of people, a radical place. As a matter of fact, it is a very cultured place. It used to be one of the real pearls of the Mideast. So before 1979, Iran shared intelligence, had economic ties and military cooperation with Israel and the United States. This is from 1950, where Ben Gurion, the founder, the first president of Israel, is talking to an Iranian diplomat in Jerusalem. And Iran had a very vibrant Jewish population. So it's not always been this way. So what happened? They had a revolution. In 1979 to 1981, there was an uprising in Iran that led to the installing of the Ayatollah as the leader of Iran, the first Ayatollah, Khomeini, and now we're on the second one, Khomeini. Now, what is this thing all about? These are students pouring over the U.S. Embassy. And our embassy personnel, 50 American hostages, were held for 444 days by these nut jobs. They were subjected to intense physical and psychological torture throughout their captivity, such as mock executions, beatings, solitary confinement, and very bad living conditions. So, this is what they did when they took over. They came after us, held our people hostage, and treated us very brutally. In 1984, the United States made Iran a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law because of the way the Iranian regime under the Ayatollah was conducting himself. They were wreaking havoc throughout the region, and they were doing things against Israel and the United States that justified their designation in 1984 as a state sponsor of terrorism, and that has not changed. Now, why are they state sponsor of terrorists? Because they're terrorists, and they support terrorists. Hezbollah, $700 million we project was given to Iran by Hezbollah. It's almost their entire budget. They're a terrorist group, mainly in Lebanon, of the Shia branch of the tree. Hamas, who conducted the October 7th attack against Israel. Israel projects that 93% of Hamas's military budget came from Iran. And we have the Houthis. All of their missiles and rockets came from Iran. We've got Shiite groups in Iraq funded by Iran. Now, why are they a state sponsor of terrorism? Because they sponsor terrorism all over the world, and they did it with petrodollars from the Iran nuclear deal and other sources of revenue, which was a really bad idea, and that's why Trump pulled out. Here's the reporting over the period here. Hamas-Iran alliance. Captured documents expose decades-long terror funding. So when Israel began to liberate Gaza from Hamas and drive out Hamas terrorists, they found a treasure trove of documents showing the history between Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, suitcase stuffed with cash. U.S. flow of funds to Yemen to help the Houthis. What else have they done other than funding terrorist groups? They've threatened to kill American officials. President Trump, Brian Hook, General McKenzie, Robert O'Brien, Mike Pompeo. former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, all these people involved in the Soleimani attack. Now, why did we go after Soleimani? Because he was the leader of the more radical elements of their military that had been targeting Americans, and he was planning to attack our forces in Iraq, and Trump took him out. 1983, Beirut barracks bombing, Hezbollah supported by Iran. Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia, terrorist groups supported by Iran. That's why they're terrorists. They have been coming after our interests. They've attacked our shipping in the Red Sea, the Houthis have, and they couldn't fire one missile without Iranian support because that's where all their rockets come from. Now, some cast of characters here. The recent new president was sworn in Iran. During the swearing in of the Iranian president, the crowd started chanting, "Death to America, death to America," during the swearing in of the new president not long ago, July 30th, 2024, not quite a year ago. So people wonder what they're up to. Let me tell you what they're up to. They're up to enacting a religious agenda that has no place for anybody but them. If you're a Christian, they want to destroy your faith. If you're Jewish, they want to wipe you off the planet. And if you're a Muslim and you don't agree with them, which most don't, they want to take over the entire faith and make you bend a knee to their view. These people are religious fanatics. What is this all about? Religion. Do you want any of these people to have a nuclear weapon? I don't. They're religious Nazis. Now, what are they? Are there any telltale signs that may tell us what they're up to? Do you really have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out? This is a missile in Iran. In Hebrew, it says death to Israel. This is the friggin' missile they took a photo of. In Hebrew, said death to Israel. Wonder what they want to do with that missile. If you're confused about this regime, you should not be allowed to drive, because you're a danger to yourself and others. If you think this is not our conflict, you've missed a lot. You've been like sleep at the switch since 1979. You don't know anything about these people. You're talking gibberish. If you don't think this is our concern, look what they've done. They've attacked Americans. They have American blood on their hands. They're trying to build a nuclear bomb. And one of the targets is us. How do I know that? Because that's what they say. Last July, they were chanting death to America while they were swearing in the president. We don't do that here. Why? Because we're not crazy. These people are crazy. The Iranian people are not, but the people ruling the place are fanatical religious Nazis. And if you don't think it's our concern, you really have missed a lot. You need to study before you talk. And if that's not enough, the missile that says death to Israel, let's see, when was this? 2015. Amid nuke talks, Ayatollah says death to America. This is during the negotiations that Obama had. So in 2022, they had 95 pounds of highly enriched uranium at 60%. Is there a commercial purpose for uranium enriched at 60%? No. In 2025, 3 years later, they have 900 pounds of this stuff. So clearly, they're not stopping their enrichment program. They're accelerating it, and they're enriching it at a level that has no commercial purpose. They actually have one reactor in Iran. The fuel for that reactor comes from Russia. They haven't taken 1 gram of their enrichment program to run the peaceful reactor they claim they want. And to run a reactor, you need to enrich between 3.5% and 5%, not 60%. Now, weapons grade enrichment is 90%. 60 to 90 is like walking across the street. So if you can't figure out what they've been up to, again, you should not be allowed to drive. They're trying to build nuclear weapons. They're making material consistent with a bomb, not a peaceful nuclear power plant. They chant death to America. They chant death to Israel. They kill their own people. They're the largest sponsor of terrorism on the planet. They've been that way since 1979. Wonder what they want to do. The Ayatollah's nuclear ambitions have been spread and said for decades now. I take him serious. Hitler wrote a book. Nobody believed he wanted to kill all the Jews. They should have. Hitler wrote a book about a master race. People should have taken him seriously. They wrote it off as just talk. They excused Hitler's provocative behavior, saying he's just saying these things. Well, we know that didn't work out too well. Last month was the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, the Nazi regime. One of the centerpieces of the Nazi regime was to kill the Jewish people. They put the Jewish people in concentration camps, gas chambers, and they tried to extinguish an entire race of people, our Jewish brothers and sisters, killing 6 million. Just a few years ago, the Jewish people got back to the numbers before the war. 80 years later, we're having a discussion about what should we do as civilized people regarding Iran. I tell you what we should do. We should do something different than we did with Hitler. Because if we do the same old thing, there goes Israel and eventually us. So their nuclear ambitions are not to build peaceful nuclear power plants and fuel them. They're making, their enrichment program is designed to make bombs. They intend to use these bombs because they're religious fanatics. Does anybody doubt if Adolf Hitler had a bomb, he would have used it? If you doubt the Ayatollah would not use a bomb against the state of Israel, you don't understand his religion. What drove Hitler? A sick, twisted, distorted view of the master race. These people want a master religion, not a master race. They want to dominate the world religiously. That's what they're all about. They export terrorism in the name of religion. They support groups that want to take down secular regimes. They want a master religion like the Nazis wanted a master race. And let me tell you what our friends in Israel are saying. Hell no. Once is enough. So what should Israel do? Here's what Israel should do. They should fight back to the American people. What would our country do if there was one missile shot into South Carolina or Alabama from a foreign power that killed our citizens? Everybody in South Carolina and Alabama would be wanting to end the terror and go after the people who did it. And it would be the entire nation. Why should we expect Israel to tolerate what we wouldn't tolerate? There's been over 1,000 missiles shot into Israel. Since their founding, people have been trying to kill them all. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis have one thing in common. They're all funded by Iran. All the weapons come from the Iranians. What is this all about? Killing the Jews. And eventually us, and dominating the world religiously. If you think that's weird, then you need to get on the internet and listen to what they're doing. You need to watch their behavior, and they mean what they say, and don't be like the people in the 30s that got it wrong. Israel's not going to let it get it wrong the second time. Donald Trump. God bless President Donald J. Trump. I am so glad he won. What has he tried to do? Make peace, not war. He gave the Ayatollah 60 days to find a peaceful settlement regarding their enrichment program. They could have nuclear power, but they can't enrich. There are 20 nations that have nuclear power that get the fuel for their reactors outside their country. We would have done that for Iran. They were tapping him along. 61 days go by, and the rest is history. They're not interested in peace. They're interested in fulfilling a religious agenda that has no place for us or the state of Israel. Hitler didn't want peace. There was not a part of the country you could give him to stop him from enacting his sick and twisted agenda. He didn't want German-speaking populations. He wanted the entire world to speak German. He wanted the entire world to fall under his Nazi regime. He was nuts. And it took a bunch of people from all over the world, particularly America, to destroy the Third Reich, and about 60 million people died because we got it wrong in the 30s. 6 million Jews. We're not going to let that happen again as long as I'm around, the presiding officer, President Trump, and the people of Israel. We're not going to let that happen. We're going to stick with Israel because sticking with them is helping us. They're fighting the people that want to kill us as much as they want to kill all the Jews. Their fight, in my view, is our fight. Operation Midnight Hammer. After day 60, all the negotiations went nowhere because the Iranians didn't want them to go anywhere. President Trump acted. And it was brilliant, it was bold, and it will live in history. To all those who took part in this, God bless you. We have the finest military on earth. We proved that yet again. But you can have the best military if you don't have the right commander-in-chief. Nothing happens. We got the right commander-in-chief married up with the strongest military in history, which will make us safer. We're not looking to take over Iran. We're not looking to invade Iran. We're looking to make sure that the fanatics who run Iran can't hurt us and can't destroy our friends in Israel. And President Trump did something about it. He sent B-2s to Guam, and everybody thought, well, what's that all about? Well, they missed the other B-2s that went to Iran and put a hurting on these 3 enrichment sites. To the pilots, to the air crews, to everybody involved, well done. I spent 30-something years in the Air Force, and I've never been more proud. Fly, fight, win. Now, what's next? They shot missiles at our air base in Qatar. The Iranians did today. About 16 or 19. One may have gotten through. I think they called us. But just remember what I said. They shot missiles at us today. They shot missiles at Israel last night. The strikes a couple of days ago were designed to shut down the enrichment facilities used to make this weapons-grade uranium. I think we're substantially successful. I've never been more proud of President Trump and our military, and I think we set back their nuclear program substantially. But here's what we didn't do. We didn't change their desire for a nuclear weapon. We changed the capability to make one. Here's my goal, is to have people in charge of Iran who don't want a nuclear weapon to destroy Israel, who will not be the largest state sponsor of terrorism, but live in peace with their neighbors and have a good relationship with the United States. That's what I want. And if you don't want that, there's something wrong with you. How do you get that? 2 ways. The religious fanatics reject their agenda. They change their behavior. Maybe that'll happen, I don't know. Or you change the people. And you replace the religious fanatics with people in Iran who do not want to destroy the world, who do not want to create a master religion, who want to live in peace. And I think that's the vast majority of the Iranians. If we get this right, stick with Israel, stand up to this bully, this religious fanatical regime, let Israel do what they need to do, then I think peace is coming. The presiding officer and myself went to Saudi Arabia and Israel to talk about Saudi Arabia recognizing the Jewish state under certain conditions. Before the attack of October 7th, we were very close to expanding the Abraham Accords to include a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel that basically would end the Arab-Israeli conflict. An amazing moment in history. October the 7th comes along, a vicious, brutal attack on Israel by Hamas, which is fully funded by Iran, raping women, killing children in front of the parents, and doing things that we really don't need to be talking about on the floor. That was designed to stop reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel, because for the Iranian fanatical regime, the worst nightmare is for the Arab world to make peace with Israel and move toward the light. These people want darkness for the world. So what do we do now? Israel has had it. I talked to the Prime Minister yesterday before I went on television, and I asked him, what would you like me to tell America, Bibi? He said 3 things. We're profoundly grateful to the American people for what you do to help the Jewish state. We couldn't be here without you. We're profoundly grateful to President Trump for his strong leadership. He also wanted me to urge the people of Iran to seize the moment to end the nightmare you've been living. And the third thing he wanted me to tell the American people is Israel is not going to live this way anymore. They're not going to raise their children in bomb shelters. They're not going to have their life interrupted daily by ballistic missiles coming from religious Nazis who want to kill all the Jews like Hitler. They're not going to put up with that. Regime change is coming to Iran one or 2 ways. The regime renounces what they've been doing since 1979 and change course, or it's replaced. To expect Israel to do anything else is offensive to me. You're asking Israel to accept normal, being attacked every day and every night by over 500 ballistic missiles? Over 24 Israeli citizens have been killed. The missiles going into Israel are designed to kill children. The attack by the Israelis are designed to shut down the regime's nuclear capability. But the targets are changing. They're now going after the police force that keeps the Ayatollah in power, the intelligence services that scare people into submission, the prisons that house dissidents. Israel has made a faithful decision to go to the heart of this regime, to take these religious Nazis down one way or the other, reject Nazism in the form of religion, or get new people. And I am with them. I'm with them to the bitter end. I'm with them because being with them is in your own interest if you're an American. Being with them is in your own interest if you believe in religious tolerance. Being with Israel means you reject a regime that would take a 16-year-old girl off the bus and beat her to death because she didn't have a head cover. This is evil we're fighting. These are as evil as the Nazis. 80 years later, we're having a debate about what the Jewish people should do to a group that wants to kill them all? Really? We're debating among ourselves what is too much against a regime trying to build dozens of nuclear weapons to blow people off the planet they don't like or agree with? What kind of world are we living in? To all those who want to hold Israel back, what would you do if it were our country? Would you hold us back? If you tried to, we'd run you over. We're not going to live this way as Americans. So what is this all about? I'm going to end where I began. It's about a fanatical regime that took over the country by force, that started out imprisoning Americans, been trying to build nuclear bombs, multiple nuclear bombs, has been the largest state sponsor of terrorism since 1984, has American blood on its hands, has attacked Israel over and over and over again, has suppressed its own people. It's about a religious agenda. Why do they do what they do? Religious, fanatical beliefs, a master religion for the world. And if you don't believe that, you have missed a lot. That's what they want, and the only way they're not going to get there is for somebody to stop them. What did Hitler want? To take over the entire world and create a master race. Anybody that didn't fit his definition of the right kind of person, was imprisoned or killed. The Ayatollah and his henchmen have that same view, but it's religiously driven. So what happens in the next few days is going to determine the course of history for the state of Israel and the region for decades to come. To our friends in Israel, finish the job. Do what you have to do to bring about the regime change that will allow your children to sleep through the night. To the American people, wake up. Understand what we're fighting. The Ayatollah is not normal. These are not normal people. Stand with Israel. Standing with Israel, you're standing by you're helping your own self. You're helping your own families. I'll make a prediction. Israel's going to win, and this regime's going to fall. This regime's going to fall of its own weight. The people in Iran are going to have a chance, as the regime gets weakened, to rise up and take back their own lives. I don't know when that day's coming, but it's coming soon. I believe that. I believe the day of reckoning is here for the religious Nazis running Iran. That their terrorism is coming to an end. And it's going to be replaced by a region that moves together, where Sunnis and Shias and Israelis and all different groups, Christians, work together to build economies where all boats rise. We live in a time of choosing. I choose to stand up to evil. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Madam President,
The senator from South Carolina.
I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Zimmerman nomination.
The Senate is in a quorum call.
Yes. To waive it, please.
Without objection.
Okay. I ask you, I know I talk funny. I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Zimmerman nomination.
Without objection.
Okay.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Daniel Zimmerman of North Carolina to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense, signed by 17 senators.
Under the previous order, the mandatory quorum call under Rule 22 has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that the debate on the nomination of Daniel Zimmerman of North Carolina to be Assistant Secretary of Defense shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Brett.
Aye. I know, it's exciting when I get to do that.
Hey, Brian.
Lindsay.
Hey, Tony. Can I have that script? Okay.
Hey, sir, how are you?
The Senate's now voting on whether to limit debate on the nomination of Daniel Zimmerman to be Assistant Defense Secretary for International Security Affairs. Mr. Zimmerman has worked as a CIA intelligence officer for 16 years and has served as an executive branch detailee for Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty's office since January of 2024. In the first Trump administration, he was involved in the Abraham Accords negotiations with Jared Kushner, who was senior advisor to the president at the time. While senators are coming to the floor to vote, we'll show testimony from Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was on Capitol Hill to testify on the president's 2026 budget request for the Justice Department.
Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons,
Committee will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We'll begin by myself being recognized for an opening statement. I'd like to welcome our witness, the Honorable Pam Bondi, Attorney General of the United States, to testify on the Department of Justice's fiscal year 2026 budget. To begin, I want to thank the Attorney General for speaking at the RX and Illicit Drug Summit this past April down in Nashville, Tennessee. That's, I think, the third or fourth of those summits that you have been there to speak, and we appreciate that especially. That summit gathers the best and brightest to discuss ways our nation can tackle the opioid and addiction crisis impacting every corner of our country. At this year's summit, we received some encouraging news from the CDC that overdose deaths have decreased by nearly 30%. Unfortunately, we still lost over 80,000 loved ones in 2024, and recent provisional data from the CDC suggests that the progress that has been made might be coming to an end. And indeed, 70% of those deaths were from fentanyl. Significant more work needs to be done to curb opioid addiction, including focusing on the precursor chemicals being produced in China and the manufacturing labs in Mexico, as well as tracking down the cartels and criminals that shop these drugs to our nation's children. The Department of Justice must keep this at the top of their priority list. Unfortunately, Madam General, your job at the top will not be easy, and the list of issues that the American people are counting on you to address is long and dangerous. From fentanyl and immigration to violent crime and supporting local law enforcement, the Department of Justice needs to uphold the rule, law and equal justice, while tackling the most dangerous situations confronting Americans. To make matters even more difficult, this all must be accomplished within a budget that needs to be right-sized for efficiency and effectiveness. The Department of Justice's fiscal year 2026 budget request totals just under $34 billion. This represents a reduction of close to $3 billion from fiscal 25, and specifically the request includes about $11 billion to target violent crime, $10 billion to tackle drug crimes, over $3 billion to defend the nation and our citizens against transnational organized crime, and over $3.5 billion to address immigration. These are the exact issues that hit home for many families, and these are the issues that are being discussed between neighbors in all of our states, including mine in Kentucky, and across the nation. After 4 years of politicization at the Biden's Department of Justice, these are the issues that the American people expect you to address. They want a Department of Justice that protects American citizens from violent crime, not one that is weaponized against them for speaking their minds. Thus far, we have seen much progress on many of these fronts, including an administration that's taking the nation's borders seriously. Attorney General Bondi, I stand ready to support you in your efforts to ensure that the American public lives in a society that is free from crime and abuse. I look forward to hearing from you today regarding the fiscal 26 budget, and then we will go from there. There are critically important funding decisions ahead of us, and I hope we can gain a better sense of your priorities today so that we can make the best decision on behalf of the American public. Let me now recognize the ranking member of this subcommittee, Ms. Ming, for any remarks she cares to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Attorney General Bondi. Tens of thousands of public servants at the Department of Justice and its bureaus have historically worked very hard and continue to work hard to protect public safety and uphold the rule of law in our country. Yet, I must take this opportunity to express my very strong concerns about this current administration's lack of respect for the rule of law. Over the past 5 months, we have seen numerous examples of this administration outright breaking the law. The administration continues to illegally withhold billions of dollars in funding that Congress appropriated, including hundreds of recently terminated justice grants that had previously been awarded through open and competitive processes. The administration is violating the federal law that mandates that the Office of Management and Budget publish apportionments and show the public how and when federal agencies are spending appropriated funds. The Justice Department has begun illegally restoring the gun possession rights of convicted felons and domestic abusers. It's allowing the sale of forced reset trigger devices without a background check. These are devices that effectively convert regular firearms into machine guns, which I fear will only make mass shootings in the United States more numerous and deadly. More than 1,500 individuals involved in the January 6th attack on the Capitol were pardoned or granted commutations of sentences. The president's new appointee as pardon attorney, Ed Martin, previously raised money to help defend some of the most violent of these individuals, people who assaulted police officers. Some of the pardoned January 6 defendants have subsequently been arrested, charged, or sentenced for other crimes. Under this president, the U.S. has accepted a luxury jetliner from Qatar, very likely in violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution. This president has also issued a series of illegal and unconstitutional executive orders, several of which are being challenged in courts right now. Presidential actions in recent months have also directed highly political and targeted investigations against law firms and individuals, including Miles Taylor, a former staffer for the House Appropriation Committee's Republican majority. Meanwhile, the administration has weakened law enforcement against political corruption by gutting the department's public integrity section, which fairly investigates and prosecutes corruption by government officials. It has dismantled Task Force Klepto-Capture, which was started after Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, to enforce sanctions and target oligarchs close to the Kremlin. It has also ended the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, which was created to defend against foreign influence operations targeting U.S. institutions. Furthermore, dozens of experienced career federal prosecutors, litigators, and FBI leaders have been fired or forced out since the start of this administration, including James Dennehy, the highly respected leader of the FBI's New York field office. I'm really concerned about what is happening in the Department of Justice, especially based on the department's fiscal year 2026 budget request. The proposed budget weakens the country's efforts to fight crime and keep Americans safe. The proposal reduces funding for the FBI, despite the heroism of agents like those in Minnesota who aided in the recent capture of the deranged man accused of killing a state representative and nearly killing another. It slashes funding to fight the trafficking of fentanyl and other dangerous illegal drugs by reducing the budget of the DEA, cutting the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program by more than a third, and by completely eliminating the dedicated funding for the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force's program. The administration also proposes a cut of more than 25% to the ATF, which will further weaken the government's ability to fight illegal gun trafficking. This budget proposal also puts further pressure on state and local budgets at a time of great economic uncertainty. The proposal cuts by more than $800 million funding to grants to local and state law enforcement for fighting and reducing crime, including a cut of more than $37 million to burn justice assistance formula grants that help our local law enforcement in every single state. I'm also concerned about the huge cuts to grants aimed at preventing and prosecuting violence against women, such as STOP grants and sexual assault services grants. The administration also proposes eliminating 3 valuable programs aimed at fighting and preventing hate crimes at the same time that the FBI is reporting that hate crimes are at historic highs. The administration's budget would completely eliminate the Community Relations Service, which was created by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prevent and resolve conflicts in American communities. These actions and this budget proposal simply don't demonstrate a commitment to the rule of law and equal rights for all Americans. I look forward to discussing these important issues at today's hearing. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
We have in attendance the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, whom I now recognize.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and Ranking Member Meng for holding this budget hearing. And also want to say a thank you to our witness, Attorney General Bondi, for appearing before the subcommittee today. Welcome to the House of Representatives. A well-functioning, well-funded, well-led Department of Justice is critical to the safety and the security of the American people. And the Department of Justice's employees are dedicated public servants who work diligently and often in dangerous settings to keep criminals off the streets. But unfortunately, the Department of Justice under your leadership has become a tool of political retaliation and the front door for criminals seeking to curry favors and pardons. As I told Director Patel last month, pressure from the White House to investigate the president's opponents or to quash investigations of his allies threaten the department's credibility and the very foundations and the foundation on which this nation stands, and that is the rule of law. The Attorney General must shield the rule of law from political pressure, not act as an instrument for implementing the president's political hit list. Attorney General Bondi, the Department of Justice is not the president's personal law firm. Loyalty or disloyalty toward the president or even the president's agenda is not a valid measure of the performance of your employees, nor of the appropriateness of a particular criminal investigation. President Trump is more focused on revenge, retaliation, and retribution, rather than lowering high price for everyday essentials, and the American people are bearing those costs. The American people expected President Trump to address the high cost of living, but the president is not laser-focused on the cost of living crisis. He is actually making it worse. Instead, he put billionaires like Elon Musk in charge of our government. And they are attacking civil servants who are not loyal to him, but to the Constitution and to the rule of law, and they are stealing programs, the funding for the programs that keep America's communities safe. This administration is deliberately undermining agencies that protect the American people. Over $4.5 billion in the Department of Justice grant, those funds, including COPS grants, the Office of Violence Against Women grants, that's been unlawfully frozen, stolen from the communities that are counting on this funding to improve their own law enforcement capabilities. This funding supports re-entry initiatives, violence prevention. It helps prevent hate crimes, provides services for crime victims, and supports underserved communities. Stealing this funding makes the American people less safe, more likely to become victims of crime. Freezing this money is an illegal impoundment. There is no lawful authority to unilaterally impound, or in my words, steals. You can continue to say there is inherent authority. You can say it over and over and over again, but it is not true. And we're going to correct it over and over and over again. And how many times can the courts and the Government Accountability Office tell you so? Your department is responsible for upholding the law. You must unfreeze grant money appropriated by the Congress or be in violation of the law. Moving to the next fiscal year, I'm eager to learn about how the Department of Justice will continue to fulfill its mission with a proposed budget that significantly cuts our nation's law enforcement agencies, key offices, and grant programs. The President's proposed budget would impair and defund the core law enforcement agencies that keep our communities safe. In essence, you are defunding law enforcement. It slashes funding for the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, limiting federal efforts to help our state and our local enforcement combat gun violence, drug trafficking, and organized crime. The budget also targets DOJ's foundational legal divisions, cutting funding for civil rights enforcement, environmental protection, and even, yes, national security. It takes an axe to grant programs and other programs that support domestic violence survivors and local police departments. It dismantles DOJ's tax division, which will only make it easier for prominent tax cheats to avoid prosecution, further increasing the burden on honest taxpayers who pay what they owe. They pay what they owe. Our largest corporations do not. And why on earth does your budget slash the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General by 30%? Does this administration want to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse or not? Our government's Inspector General are absolutely critical nonpartisan offices that help Congress and the American people eliminate and prevent that prevent fraud and corruption. This administration has directly undermined and even removed over a dozen of these offices across our government. Waste, fraud, and abuse are not the targets of President Trump's White House. They are the primary objectives. This budget does not put the safety and security of the American people first. It puts white-collar criminals, drug traffickers, and violent offenders first, while eviscerating your department's ability to stop them. The Department of Justice exists to uphold the rule of law. The American people deserve assurance that everyone will be treated equally under the law. Instead, this administration breaks the law with reckless abandon. President Trump, like every other American, must follow the law. Russ Vought must follow the law. Secretaries Noem and Kennedy and McMahon must follow the law. And we must understand why your department is complicit in law-breaking from the highest office. I yield back.
We want to say congratulations to the Attorney General on her selection to this very important post. But she brings a great record from her home state of Florida in her earlier part of her life. So we're proud of you, and we welcome you to the subcommittee. And you're now recognized for an opening statement, which will be entered into the record.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Rogers, Member DeLauro, and Ranking Member Meng, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to appear before you today to present the President's fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Justice. I look forward to working with all of you to ensure continued support for the Department and our many critical missions. President Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposal totals $34 billion for the Department of Justice. That money will support federal law enforcement as well as our state, local, and tribal law enforcement partners. My primary objective as Attorney General is to return the department to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously enforcing the law. This budget will allow us to continue doing just that. Since January 20th, we have dismantled deadly fentanyl networks across our country. We prosecuted MS-13 and TDA members using terrorism and RICO charges. We've seized thousands of illegal guns from cartels and extradited key cartel leaders into U.S. prisons. Last month, the FBI arrested 205 child predators in a single operation, and the DEA executed the largest fentanyl bust in the history across 4 states. We have also surged FBI resources to investigate thousands of violent crimes committed against American Indian and Alaskan Native people. These are just a few examples of what we've achieved thus far. The budget will allow us to continue doing our crucial work. We've also led the charge to enforce our immigration laws, rebuild our immigration system after 4 years of chaos, help secure our nation's borders, moreover. We must guarantee that our laws allow us to process, hold, and remove those who enter our country illegally. Our U.S. attorneys continue to effectively work with law enforcement at all levels to investigate and prosecute the increasing volume of immigrated-related criminal offenses. Additionally, the President and I have established and reinvigorated 3 task forces to enforce the administration's priorities. The Homeland Security Task Force is enhancing federal and state law enforcement cooperation to destroy criminal cartels, foreign gangs, and transnational criminal organizations throughout our country. Joint Task Force Alpha will continue to specifically target the human trafficking and human smuggling networks that took root while our border was wide open. And Joint Task Force Vulcan will continue successful efforts to arrest and prosecute members of TDA and MS-13. We are also committed to making America safe again by reducing recidivism. The Bureau of Prisons has suffered mismanagement, lack of funding, and low morale. Throughout my confirmation process, BOP came up in every single meeting, regardless of the senator's party. The President's budget proposal will address critical staffing shortages, enhance staff retention, and deliver positive changes to a system that has long needed improvements. The resources made available through President Trump's proposal will also empower the department to continue fighting our war on fentanyl. Since January 2025, the DEA has already seized 41.5 million fentanyl pills and 4,470 kilos of fentanyl powder. It's a historic rate, but it's not enough. We won't rest until this poison is off our streets. And finally, the 2026 budget continues my commitment to find savings in the department, reduce inefficiencies, and deliver value to the American taxpayer. In fiscal year 2026, the department will merge components that will work in overlapping areas and make our law enforcement and grant-making efforts more effective. We will emerge from this work as a leaner organization, better equipped to keep the American people safe. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member DeLauro, Ranking Member Mang, it is my pleasure to highlight our efforts to be good stewards of these resources. I am working diligently to restore confidence and integrity to the department and each of these components. Thank you for your continued support of the department's financial needs and for the opportunity to present our budget request. I also would ask all of us now to pray for our troops in Qatar.
Amen.
I look forward to working with you and I'm now happy to take any questions you might have.
We will proceed under the 5-minute rule, and I will yield myself the first 5 minutes. As you know, Madam Attorney General, rural America, many parts of the country, including my district, continue to suffer from the lethal effects of illicit drug use and overdose deaths. How does your 26 budget propose to address drug crimes such as trafficking and the influx? What are you doing differently than in the past?
Chairman, what we are doing, we are focusing all of our law enforcement agencies on getting these drugs off of our streets. Since I was a state AG, I focused on the opioid crisis. I focused with all of our agencies working hand in hand on the drug crisis. Securing our borders, I believe, was the first step. We will continue to do that. On May 22nd, I believe, Chairman, we announced the success of Operation Raptor, the FBI-led DOJ operation that targeted fentanyl trafficking on the dark web. That's become a huge problem. You know, with added technology now, we have seen drug trafficking increased not only across our borders, not only through the mail, but also on the web. And that's something I believe that we can all work together on. I believe that crosses party lines. That's something that we all need to work together on. We've seized 144 kilos of fentanyl, 180 firearms, and over $200 million in currency and digital assets, working with 9 international partners and arresting 270 drug traffickers across 4 continents. And that was all because of Operation Raptor. On May 6th, we executed the biggest fentanyl bust in DEA's history. We dismantled a Sinaloa cartel that trafficked across 5 states: New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Oregon, and Nevada. We seized 412 kilos of fentanyl pills, 11.5 kilos of fentanyl powder, and 49 illegal firearms. We arrested 16 accused drug traffickers. These cartels, these gangs, are so organized that they insulate their leaders. The leader of this particular cartel was living in Oregon, yet none of the drugs were with him. This was incredible police work by all of our agencies, federal agencies, working hand in hand to track them down. I met in conference rooms. We had charts, and I would invite any of you members on both sides of the aisle to come in and see these investigations of what we are trying to do to get these drugs off our streets. They are so complex, they are so complicated, and what our law enforcement have been doing is really second to none. And I am so proud. They are some of the bravest in the world. And I am so proud at what they have been doing, working with all of our state and local partners to eradicate these drugs. My point of that was in Oregon, was the leader of this particular Sinaloa gang. And again, he insulated himself. But we were able to catch him thanks to great police work, and we will continue to do that.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks for the invitation. I hope we can take you up on that. During his hearing before us, FBI Director Patel indicated a lot of precursor chemicals that originated in China are now going to terrorist organizations that reroute the precursors into our country through the northern border. What can you say about that?
Yes, Chairman, that's accurate. You know, I've been fighting this fentanyl epidemic since I was a state AG, when it really first came on the market. Ironically, I was recently in Poland at a security conference with all of my counterparts around the world, and I will never forget something they said to me. My counterpart in Poland said, fentanyl isn't here yet, because they protect their borders. And yes, the northern border is now a great concern to all of us. I would think to everyone on this committee. And yeah, that's it. That's a great concern, but we will continue to do that. We are fighting to protect those precursors from coming in, as we know. And what they keep doing is they're changing the precursors. And they continue to change them, and they continue to send them through Mexico, through Canada, on ships, through our ports of entry, into our country. But that's something we have to all work together on to stop. I went to our DEA lab. I met with our DEA. It only takes, it looks like almost 2 grains of salt. I had them put sodium chloride in a little bottle so I could show people. That's what it takes to kill you. And that's what our kids are taking. They don't realize that it is mixed. They think they're buying a Xanax, an Adderall. I can't say this enough. An oxycodone pill. They think they are buying something else, and this junk is being laced, this poison, into these pills throughout our country. And that's something I feel like we can all work together on to try to stop. But yes, that was, a very long answer to yes, it's coming in through our northern border, but we are doing everything we can to secure that. We are working with Homeland Security very closely, and they're doing an incredible job on that as well, Chairman.
Ms. May.
Madam Attorney General, I wanted to ask about a topic that's of great importance to many Americans and especially my constituents, which is about hate crimes. I'm really troubled that your budget proposes to end the grant programs that may help prevent some of these hate crimes. As you may know, I was the author of one of these programs, the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice program, which was created in fiscal year 2022. This program supported local groups working to increase hate crimes reporting, give community members resources in languages other than English, and to improve relationships between local law enforcement and the community. It was a direct response to the rise in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. You may recall in March 2021, 6 women of Asian descent were tragically murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. My Hate Crimes Act passed through Congress in May of that year with bipartisan support, including from several of my colleagues on the other side of the dais. For years, I've been hearing from constituents about how scared they felt and have been hearing from members of these communities as well as experts who've told me that one of the best ways to combat hate in this country is to fund prevention programs. So not just prosecution, but also prevention. I have a letter here that hate crime survivors and family members wrote to you in May, expressing their strongest concerns about the termination of these grants. Signed by people like family members of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and survivors of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the hearing record this letter from these survivors and family members to Attorney General Bondi regarding the termination of hate crimes related grant programs.
Without objection.
Oh, yes, without objection.
Thank you, Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, I absolutely share your support for law enforcement and for the prosecution of hate crimes in a just way, but we must combat all forms of hate on all fronts, bringing together law enforcement and community leaders and members of the public. And these grant programs have helped many communities do exactly this. So I just wanted to ask and hear from you why there is a proposal to eliminate the 3 largest sources of DOJ funding for hate crime prevention programs.
Yeah, and Ranking Member, can you list those 3 for me again? And I'm sorry, I have not received your letter yet, but I would welcome working with you on any issue regarding hate crimes in the Asian American community, in any community. I welcome working with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would love to. And this letter was sent May 15th, and we'll make sure that you and your team have received it. So the programs, one of them, for example, is named the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice. 3 programs have been cut, and one of these programs literally help support our law enforcement departments locally, like our NYPD, to train and respond to hate crimes.
We have 5,800 grants, Chairman, that come, Ranking Member, that come through my office. 365 have been cut so far. That's approximately 6%. What I will tell you is we have turned back on 13 of those so far because people have reached out to me. If you want to reach out and talk to me directly, I will give you my cell phone. I would love to sit down with you and see if we can work that out. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with those 3 directly. But again, we will, if you have on either side of the aisle any grants that you believe should be back on, I would love to meet with you and work with you on that. We're doing that on a case-by-case basis.
Hospitals are going to be forced to close, and we are going to plunge the country into trillions of dollars of new debt. Now, what is this all for? Is it to improve our schools and roads? Is it to make housing and child care more affordable? Is it because we're in the middle of a crisis that just has to be paid for, or we're going to pay down the national debt? No, it's none of those things. It's because they want to cut taxes for the richest people to ever exist. And if that means that you can't see your doctor, or you have to pay hundreds of dollars more every month to pay for your health care, tough luck. Now here's the thing. Republicans actually know what they are walking into, because people in their own states are telling them what's about to happen. Quote, "We can't sustain serving our community the way we are with these cuts," one hospital leader in Kansas said. A health executive in Texas wrote, "Cutting billions of dollars from Medicaid would have widespread and devastating consequences for Texans. Beyond the obvious impacts to people enrolled in the program, the collateral damage to the program will be felt across the board. Hospitals will do everything they can to weather the storm, but some may not survive. Others will have to increase their reliance on state or local support or reduce services. Access to care will decrease, especially for high-cost service lines like maternal health care and behavioral health. Jobs will be lost. The impact on communities which rely on their hospitals for employment and for growth will be profound." A Utah father who credited Medicaid with saving his own son's life said, "Without Medicaid, these life-saving treatments would have been financially impossible. There is absolutely no way we would have covered the costs on our own. And in this way, our story is not unique. So many families insured by Medicaid could have to make difficult, life-altering decisions if Congress slashes funding." And a former Republican elected official in Georgia warned, quote, "Cuts to Medicaid are not only fiscally irresponsible, but they could threaten the livelihoods of our fellow Georgians and the economic opportunities that consistently make our great state a top state for business." So the stakes are clear. It's people's health, it's people's hard-earned money, it is people's lives. And whether you're in a red or a blue state, you will absolutely feel the weight of this terrible piece of legislation. More than a quarter of nursing homes may close. Hundreds of rural hospitals will shutter. And for what? To pay down the debt? Because we're a nation at war? Because we want to invest in infrastructure or schools or healthcare? No. The reason they are making these cuts to food assistance, the reason they are making these cuts to rural hospitals, the reason they are making these cuts so that people are going to have to pay several $100s more per month for their own health care is to create enough revenue for the biggest tax cut, the biggest wealth transfer from working people to wealthy people in the history of the United States of America. Even if you're not on Medicaid yourself, you likely know someone who is, a friend, a neighbor, a relative, a coworker. And more than that, kicking tons of people in your community off of health care will drive up costs for everybody else and make high-quality care hard to find. You are going to pay more for less care. All for the biggest tax cut in American history for the people who need it the least. And I have no problem with the people who need it the least, but the truth is they need it the least. If you are financially successful and you make $4 million a year, God bless. That's the American dream. It does not mean you need a tax cut. And it does not mean you need a tax cut paid for by reducing services, especially in rural communities. Now, the good news is this. We actually don't have to do this. There is no rush to do this. There is no clamoring among constituents in red or blue states to do this. This is an add-on. What they wanted to do is extend the original Trump tax cuts. Now, I oppose those tax cuts, but I can understand Republicans, as a sort of article of faith, want to extend the tax cuts that their president enacted 2 terms ago. Fair enough. Good, solid, old-fashioned policy disagreements. But then they just larded it up with stuff, giveaways to special interests, and cuts and cuts and cuts to things that people care about, left, right, and center. And so we don't actually have to do it this way. You're going to pay more for less care, all so that billionaires just have a little more money sitting in their accounts. It's going to require 4 Republicans saying enough is enough. And I've heard a number of my Republican colleagues talk about how essential Medicaid is to their rural communities. And it's not just the people who are on Medicaid. Obviously, those are the people you got to be primarily concerned with. But a lot of us go home and visit both urban and rural hospitals, and they all say the same thing, which is that if you blow out like 30% of your revenue, you can't function as an institution. So it's not just a question of whether you personally are on Medicaid or you personally care about Medicaid. It's about, does your rural hospital even survive after this bill is enacted? Nobody wants this, and there is still time to kill this bill. I yield the floor.
Senator from Vermont. There is time to kill this bill, and I hope we do. You know, as my colleague from Hawaii just said, what's happening in this bill is the infliction of bipartisan suffering. Whether it's in the state of Vermont or the state of West Virginia or the state of Tennessee, folks who are depending on Medicaid are going to lose it. Let me just give a couple of examples. When I was in the House, my good friend David McKinley, Republican, invited me to West Virginia, and we went to the Harrison coal mine. And I was very deeply moved because the only people I know who work as hard as coal miners are dairy farmers. So we have a lot in common. Hard-working folks in Vermont, hard-working folks in West Virginia. But what this bill is going to do is threaten the access to health care that those West Virginia folks need, just like those folks in Vermont need, just like those folks in Tennessee need. It is not about whether you're a Republican or Democrat. It's not about whether you're from a red or blue state. It's actually about real people who work in coal mines, who work on dairy farms, who work in factories. Seniors who need the help of nursing homes. 2 out of 3 nursing home beds are paid for by Medicaid. Parents and disabled children so depend on health care, especially through Medicaid. And that's true in West Virginia. It's true in Nebraska. It's true in Tennessee. It's just as it is in Vermont. Let me just give a few numbers. In Vermont, 32,000 people are going to lose health care if this bill is passed. In West Virginia, 76,000 people will lose their health care coverage. In Tennessee, it's going to be 290,000 people who are going to lose their health care. It's not just those individuals who are going to lose health care. This budget reconciliation bill, the big beautiful bill, the big bad betrayal, there's real consequences to this that are going to be devastating to rural America. And we have a lot in common in Vermont with so many other parts of rural America, like West Virginia and like Tennessee. Rural hospitals will close, and people will be forced to travel for their care so far that they oftentimes won't be able to get it. And the sad reality, you take away people's health care, they're going to get sick and stay sick. You take away people's health care, and people are going to die. You know, the American Hospitals Association showed that this bill will likely close 338 hospitals in rural communities across the entire country, in your state and in mine. In Vermont, the fear is 3 out of 14 hospitals are at risk of closure with the passage of this bill. In West Virginia, 7 hospitals are at the risk of closure. And in Tennessee, 9 hospitals will be immediately at the risk of closure. You know what happens too, and it's like we don't even debate this, we don't even discuss it when this reality is about to strike a hammer blow to folks in rural America. If people lose their health care, it doesn't mean they don't need health care. It just means they can't pay for health care. So folks in Vermont who were depending on Medicaid are going to show up at our rural hospitals. Our hospitals are under a legal requirement to provide care. By the way, they would provide care even without a legal requirement, because that's what we do in rural America. We help folks who need help. But those hospitals, already on a thin margin, are not going to be able to afford it, and that's what threatens to have them go out of business. And then we know the spiral. Mr. President, this bill in Vermont is going to result in over $200 million pardon me, in uncompensated care in the next 10 years. In West Virginia, it's $1.4 billion. In Tennessee, it's over $3.5 billion. These rural hospitals, they provide critical care to people in need. We've got to protect the people first. We take away their hospitals, they have no protection. We've got to protect the struggles that communities in rural America have to keep a strong community sense against the enormous pressures that they face. There's a cruelty in this bill. There's an irresponsibility in the Senate if we don't acknowledge explicitly what the impact of this bill will be on the people we represent, pardon me, on the hospitals that are dependent on us, and on the future of community strength in all of our rural communities. Let's kill this bill. Mr. President, I yield back. Senator from Vermont. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks. That I am certain. Also, one other thing about ATF is our seizure of firearms is up 33% from this time last year.
Thank you.
Wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about the merger of DEA and the ATF, and kind of, if you'd elaborate on that. You've talked a little bit about it already. The one thing that I think is very important is that the ATF and federal firearms licensees work together, because truly FFLs are the front line when it comes to illegal purchases and just the information that is out there, and we can help each other as long as we have a good relationship with each other. And during the last administration, it was a terrifying relationship. I mean, you had the zero tolerance against federal firearms licenses. I'm sorry, we're all human. Everybody makes mistakes. Okay, and they're not intentional, they're just mistakes. And when you can lose your livelihood and you can lose your business and your employees can lose their jobs over simple mistakes, that's a real problem, especially when, if you think about federal firearms licensees, they're the pathway to the Second Amendment of the Constitution. They enable individual participation in the protection of liberty. I mean, that's what federal firearms licensees do. So I think it's really important to have that critical relationship between ATF and the federal firearms licensees. And, when the inspectors, when the ATF went from the Treasury to the Department of Justice, and the inspection side of it, when the IOIs, when they were, industry operations inspectors, when they became industry operations investigators, okay, you investigate crime, you really inspect records. That was concerning to me. So my thought was maybe we could move the IOIs to the Department of Commerce, but just would get your thought on that.
Yeah, and Congressman, that's the first time I've heard about that. I would love to meet with you and learn more
Great.
about that.
I look
But
forward
thank you
to it.
for asking about the ATF-DEA merger. In the world in which we live, bureaucracy has been around for a very long time. And just because things have been done one way for decades and decades doesn't mean that is the most efficient way to do them in the future. And that I'm a career prosecutor. I care about ATF. I went to ATF's memorial service. We are doing everything we can to put those ATF agents on the street where they want to be. Anyone in modern day history, the years of prohibition are over. ATF, they want to be on the street. They want to be working hand in hand with DEA. That's what they do. No redundancy, no repeat of investigations. They are going to be working together, and that's what this reorganization does. And they're all going to be, it's going to be a great marriage between those two agencies. They're working hand in hand on task forces already. Now they will be working under one umbrella, and it's going to be great for our country.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
yield back.
It's expired. Mr. Ivey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on what Congressman Gonzalez raised with you with respect to the new environment that we're in now with the essentially a war with Iran. A few weeks ago, your FBI director sat in the same chair and said that he thought in the budget that's been proposed, they're about $11.2 billion short. He wanted an additional 1,100 positions that were lost to attrition, and 1,300 he wanted to have filled. That's before the scenario with Iran. Now, I know you submitted the budget already and you want to stick with it, but please take another look. This is a new environment. I think the points that the congressman raised are very valid with respect to the issue of sleeper cells and threats domestically here. Taking FBI agents off the street now is there isn't a worse possible time you could do it. So please reconsider that and move in a different direction on that, because we need more of them on the street, not fewer. Ms. DeLauro was raising issues with respect to your budget, the IOI cuts and the 86 agents that are going to be cut too. And the concern I have on that front, I know you're saying they want to be on the street, but they're ATF agents that do things that aren't on the street. So like, for example, the Nibbin work where they match the cartridges to the guns is critical. And I'm very concerned that some of the cuts you're going to make are going to impact that. And the Nibbin pieces are critical for state and local law enforcement. It's like you used to be, because a lot of them don't have the resources to track it down. And the information that they can get, they can turn it around in 48 hours. So the man who attempted to assassinate now President Trump, the connection that was made was through this apparatus, this approach. The same thing with the Minnesota assassin. So that's an area where we can't afford to have those kind of cuts, I don't think, at this time. And the performance of fewer regulatory inspections. I had gun dealers in my district who needed those inspections to take place, and important findings have been made, certainly with respect to tracking crime guns and cracking down on gun dealers who are working illicitly. I'm not saying they all do. I mean, many of them operate in the right way, but the only way to track it down is through inspections that have to be aggressive. And by the way, even under the current regime, or the previous regime, I think some of them didn't get inspections for maybe every 10 years or so. So it wasn't like it's a constant harassment piece. But I've got some folks here in the corner of the hearing room who are from my district. Moms Demand Action, DMV Mothers Like Me, Women's Missionary Society. I met with them a few weeks ago, and the concern was the issue of gun violence on our streets and the desire to make sure that the federal presence continues to push hard to make sure we close those cases. You're reducing resources, you're reducing the number of agents, as Mr. Patel said. That's moving in the opposite direction. What response would you give to them with respect to the steps that you're taking to make sure not only that we stay safe, but we get even safer and do even more to get violent offenders off the street and get the guns off the street before the violent offenders get them?
So first, Congressman Ivey, you're a former prosecutor, and I'm smiling because I could see that in some of your questions. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to try to answer them all in order of how you ask them. You asked about the FBI, our budget, and Director Patel clarified that in front of the Senate, I think, and our budget includes $10.1 billion, 12,926 agents for the FBI.
I think clarification would be gentle. It was a complete flip-flop on what he said when he was here.
So
He was asked 3 times by
prioritized.
Ms. DeLauro just to make sure that he was right about what he had said when he was
They
testifying.
prioritize realignment of personnel to the field to carry out national security, which you just talked about, intelligence, criminal law enforcement, and criminal justice missions.
Can I do this?
Can I just keep? I only have 34 seconds to answer
I've
you,
got
and I
3
really
quick
want to
questions
answer.
for you, and I'd love
You're
to get,
asking 3
I'd love to-
questions,
I'd
and you
love
haven't
to get
let
your
me answer
answers.
one.
I'd
I
love to
want
get
to
your
talk about
answers in
Niven.
writing. Quick questions.
Niven.
When you were the Attorney General in Florida,
Chairman, can I answer
you
the
offered,
question?
You offered, after the Parkland shooting, I believe this is my time, under the rules, and I had,
Stop the clock.
can we stop the clock?
Stop the clock at a different.
Be respectful of each other.
Mr. Chairman, what I just said was, if you could submit your answers in writing, that would be great. I don't think I've made any kind of statement that's been accusatory with respect to her or her professional reputation. There's been no attack on her. These were just questions that were asked. I'm seeking the answers in writing, which would be great. But I have a couple others that I'd like to ask too, and we'll do them on. No, it hasn't. You cut me off when there were 30 seconds left. Yeah. So, well, that's true too. A couple of you all went over like a minute and a half.
Over almost 2 minutes.
I just would like my 30 seconds back. And then if she can submit answers in writing, that'll be fine. But, but I want to get these questions in while she's here.
Go ahead. No.
I want to ask the questions and she can submit the answers. This is my 5 minutes. I get to do it the way I want to do it. Under the committee rules and under the House rules. These are my 5 minutes. And as I said, I have not been disrespectful to this witness. I have not. Or
I feel like you did. I feel like you did.
okay. When you were the Attorney General in Florida after the Parkland shooting, my understanding is that you moved to ban gun sales to people under 21. Is that a position that you would take now as the Attorney General? I have a bill, H.R. 2368, which does something like that. I would be interested in if you'd be willing to co-sponsor or support that bill. You also moved to enact red flag laws, allowing a judge temporarily to confiscate weapons when he or she viewed that the person was at risk of hurting himself or someone else. Is that a position you would continue to support now? And the last one is ghost guns. Ghost guns, I don't think you took a position on it back when you were the AG in Florida, but we've had 2 bills come through here in the Congress, all Democratic co-sponsors. I think there's no argument that ghost guns have any, appropriate use on the street. They only help criminals avoid prosecution. Would you support a legislative ban on ghost guns? And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Ming, for having this hearing today. I'd also like to thank the subcommittee staff for their hard work. Attorney General Bondi, thank you for being here today. I commend you for your efforts to prioritize President Trump's America First agenda and commitment to making America safe again. As you know, I represent Alabama's 5th Congressional District, which includes Huntsville and Redstone Arsenal. I'm especially supportive of the FBI Director Patel's plan for the continued movement of FBI personnel to North Alabama. My district has repeatedly answered the call to support our law enforcement agencies with a second-to-none workforce, cutting-edge facilities, and room for growth. Attorney General Bondi, do you support the FBI's plan to move additional personnel and programs to Redstone Arsenal and out of the Beltway?
Thank you. Congressman, for your question. And yes, we are moving 500 additional personnel from D.C. to Alabama, to Redstone. Redstone is a state-of-the-art facility. It will enhance everything we do, training for FBI, training for other employees, and Huntsville provides the most cost-effective location with a distinct partnership opportunities, and we support all of that that's happening, and I look forward to visiting it one day. Could I have a couple minutes to answer a couple of your fellow congressman's questions? Thank you. He asked me about NIBN, and yet he didn't want to hear my answer. NIBN means National Integrated Ballistics Enforcement Network. I'm very aware of that. We are not cutting that. ATF's receiving $66 million. It's an important program. And I know he would not intentionally attempt to mislead anyone by saying that I'm trying to cut that, but that's not being cut. I'm a career prosecutor. I've used that. I'm sure he's used it as a prosecutor. It's an important program that provides critical support to 7,200 state and local partners we work with. It's a key element to combat violent crime and firearms. So I am a huge supporter of NIBN, and we will continue to do that. You asked me to talk to moms. I will always speak to moms in my office, in any environment. Yes, and I lived the Parkland shooting. I still talk to and meet with all of those families, both Democrat and Republican alike. I will continue to do that as a career prosecutor. Speaking of moms, I'm sure you met with Patty Morrill, Patty Moran. She is the mom of a murdered woman in your district. I'm sure you met with her. I'm sure he met with Tammy Nobles, Kayla Hamilton. That was her daughter who got murdered. So yes, I'm willing to meet with any mom from any side of the aisle. And thank you, Congressman, for letting me discuss
Absolutely.
that.
Would the gentleman yield?
I want to move my questions. In my district, we have the FBI, the ATF, DHS working together to address bombing incidents and use of explosives. The FBI's Hazardous Device School and Terrorist Explosive Device Analytics Center, affectionately known as TDAC, the ATF's National Center for Explosives Training and Research, and the U.S. Bomb Data Center are all located at Redstone Arsenal. As mentioned, ATF's National Center for Explosives and Training Research is a world-class facility located at Redstone. The center provides remarkable training facilities and specializes in life-saving explosives and arsons training. Can you discuss how merging the ATF with the DEA will streamline their activities while ensuring their critical and unique capabilities are maintained?
Yes, absolutely. And yes, the National Center for Explosive Training and Research at Redstone, it's pretty remarkable what they do. They oversee the canine operations, I believe, as well as the criminal profiling, the explosives, the arson investigations, and I look forward to working with you. I look forward to visiting that. I really want to go to that facility. There are no cuts planned for that. And that's where ATF and DEA, again, can partner together. The drugs and the guns go together. Those agents will be working hand in hand. The bureaucracy at the top will be gone. There will be no redundancy. They will be working hand in hand at that facility and many others throughout our country. Thank you.
Mr. Attorney General, I just want to thank you how you represent yourself and you represent this country. It's a hard task what you have to do. You represent Democrats, Republicans, but what you have done in these first 5 months have reestablished the American people's belief in what the DOJ is to do for the American people. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Amen.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Meng for holding this important hearing, and thank you, Attorney General Bondi, for appearing before us today. Madam Attorney General, I serve in addition to the Appropriations Committee as a ranking member of the Committee on House Administration. I sent you a letter last week along with my Republican counterpart, Chairman Brian Stile, requesting an increase in federal prosecutory resources to address threats against members of Congress, particularly in light of what happened last week in Minnesota, that tragedy. In 2024, the U.S. Capitol Police identified and received nearly 9,500 concerning statements or threats against members. Federal prosecutors have only secured 8 convictions
so far, and the heightened threat environment demands an all-hands-on-deck approach. Will you commit to assigning an assistant U.S. attorney or a special assistant U.S. attorney in each of the 94 federal districts to, at least on a part-time basis, investigate and prosecute threats against members of Congress?
So thank you for bringing that up, and I take that very seriously. Not only what happened in Minnesota was horrible. I've spoken to Keith Ellison. I've spoken to Amy Klobuchar about that. It's horrible. We are involved in that. The FBI was involved. Our U.S. attorneys are involved. Many of these are district to district. So the way we're doing that is, I will tell you, my National Security Division is involved in all of those and assisting in those. We meet every single morning and we discuss that. But many of those, Minnesota, will be handled in the state in which it happened. Another one is Governor. I'm sorry if I can keep going. I'm sorry. I don't mean
Quickly,
to.
though.
I filibuster. Governor Shapiro and what happened in Pennsylvania with Governor Shapiro. I've spoken to Governor Shapiro. We are working hand in hand, our U.S. attorney with the district attorney there, hand in hand, just like in Minnesota. I made sure our U.S. attorney and our district attorneys there were working hand in hand. Political party doesn't matter when something like this happens. And I also want to make sure all members of Congress are safe as well.
Okay, and I would reiterate, Chairman Stile and I think Chairman Stile and I agree that at least a part-time in each of the 94 districts would be appropriate. Let me change topics for just a moment.
Really quick on that. Yes, we're doing that through our National Security Division, so I think that's already in the works, and I would be glad to meet with you in a secure facility to talk about that.
Very good. Thank you. Continuing, in addition to my role here, the committee that I serve on as an authorizer oversees Capitol security as well as federal elections, so I'm closely following the aftermath of January 6th. Recently, several defendants who received presidential pardons related to that day are now arguing in court that the pardon covers crimes like, for instance, illegal firearm possession discovered in a search of an individual's home in California months after January 6th. What's your position on whether the pardons cover these separate offenses?
Yeah, the pardon power rests with the president, not the Department of Justice, and some of that is pending litigation, and I cannot discuss pending litigation.
Well, I'm not asking you about who has the right to a pardon. I think as the Department of Justice in February wrote, the pardon is an act of grace which removes the punishment from a crime a person has committed. It further said, in its effect, the granting of a pardon is in no sense the overturning of a judgment of conviction. It is an executive action that mitigates or sets aside punishment. So as the chief law enforcement officer, what's your opinion, not the president's power of whether he can offer a pardon? That's pretty clear in the Constitution. But for crimes committed unrelated to January 6th, would you suggest that the pardons would cover activities or crimes potentially committed outside of that by the same person?
Well, I don't know if you're referring to Joe Biden pardoning his son after he said he would not pardon Hunter Biden, or the
no, I actually
commutation
referred
of
to
all
January
the
6th.
all the sentences that the people that were on death row. I've met with those families, and all of those sentences were commuted. I'm not going to comment on pardons on either side of the aisle.
So, well, I'm not asking about either side. I'm asking, you're the chief law enforcement officer in the United States. You have a responsibility directly, but you swore an oath to the Constitution, not the president. Want to know what your views are on the extent to which pardons cover potential crimes committed by individuals who have been pardoned but unrelated to January 6th.
Do you mean the ones that were done by the auto pen? I'm not going to discuss anything that
Mr.
could
Chairman,
be or not be pending litigation.
Respectfully, Ms. DeLauro accused you of filibustering. I think that's the height of filibustering. This is a serious, serious topic, and for you to suggest that you don't have an opinion or to divert to other things that had nothing to do with January 6 pardons, I think is, frankly, demeaning to your responsibilities and your job. With that, I'll yield back.
Mr. Klein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General, thank you for being here today. When I am home in my district talking to my constituents, they are concerned about their safety. They are concerned about the safety of their communities, the safety of their neighborhoods. And as we have spoken many times under your leadership, the DOJ has taken decisive steps to restore the rule of law, to tackle violent crime, and to hold both foreign and domestic bad actors accountable. I read your opening statement, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to go back again and talk about, in light of 4 years of open borders, the drugs that are coming in, the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, the gangs that have moved in, the terrorism that has infiltrated the United States, the sleeper cells that may or may not be present in this country, the political prosecutions that we saw over the 4 years of the Biden administration, the fact that we are restoring integrity to the office and the rule of law. Can you restate for my constituents how the actions of the Department of Justice and your agencies are keeping them safe?
Thank you, Congressman. And we have also been working hand in hand on a task force with your governor, with Governor Youngkin. And we started a task force with Governor Youngkin, and that's something that we would like to take to every single state, both Democrat and Republican. And that's how we've been able to fight these gangs, these transnational cartels, these organizations, these criminal organizations. And it was really remarkable. One of the top members of TDA was living 20 minutes from where we're sitting right now in Virginia, and working hand in hand, regardless of political party, with state and local law enforcement officers throughout the state of Virginia. We were able to dismantle a major gang, and there are so many gang members, and he was another one who was living there. I think when he was arrested, he had multiple, and ATF was involved in that, multiple guns when he was arrested, but he did not have any of the drugs on him. He had insulated himself because he was one of the leaders of the criminal organization. And so these task force working together with the state of Virginia have been remarkable. So that's one way to break it down, what we've done. And we're just so proud of the partnership that we've had with your state, dismantling the gangs, the guns, the drugs, and we'll continue to do that.
And when you have that partnership, you can get a lot done.
You can get so much done.
Secure a safer community for the people living there. When you have sanctuary states like California and who are preventing you from actually getting in there and actually getting the gangs off the streets, getting the drugs and the human trafficking off the streets, that hurts the people of those states. You know, when the streets of Los Angeles descended into scenes more fitting of a failed state than a major American city, mobs setting fire to police cruisers and looting entire city blocks, videos online showing American flags being burned and the flags of foreign nations being flown, some carried by rioters proudly waving them through smoke-filled streets. The Department of Homeland Security has revealed new data saying that ICE law enforcement is now facing a 500% increase in assaults while carrying out enforcement operations. Can you describe what actions you've taken to hold these sanctuary jurisdictions accountable? And I have a couple questions after that.
Yeah, thank you. To California specifically, and we have made it very clear. If you spit, I believe it was an ICE officer, someone spit on him, we charge them federally. We will charge you if you spit on a law enforcement officer. If you loot under the Hobbs Act, that is a robbery, and we will charge you with robbery. We are going after the maximum penalty federally for anyone who touches a federal agent, and we are also going to protect our state and local law enforcement agencies and officers. The men and women every day around this country, whether it's a blue or red or purple state, are out there fighting crime. That's what they care about. They care about keeping every single one of us safe.
That's and to be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 2:15 p.m. on Tuesday, June 24th, that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later today, morning business be closed, and the Senate proceed to executive session and resume consideration of Cal number 138, Daniel Zimmerman, post-cloture, and the Senate vote on confirmation of the nomination at 2:45 p.m., and following disposition of the Zimmerman nomination, notwithstanding Rule 22, the Senate resume consideration of Cal number 140, Pal Dabar, and Senator Houston be recognized to speak. Further, that the Senate recess from 4 to 5 p.m., and the Senate vote on a motion to invoke cloture on a DeBar nomination at 5:45 p.m. And if cloture is invoked, the Senate vote on confirmation at the time to be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with the Democrat Leader on Wednesday, June 25th. And that following confirmation of the DeBar nomination, the Senate vote to be Senate vote on a nomination to invoke cloture on count number 93, Kenneth Keys. Finally, if any nominations are confirmed during Tuesday's session of the Senate, the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's actions.
Without objection.
If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 2:15 tomorrow.
The Senate today advanced a nomination of Daniel Zimmerman to be Assistant Defense Secretary for International Security Affairs. Tomorrow, lawmakers will also vote on President Trump's nominee